So, what would you do if the woods started calling your name? If you heard a voice that didn't belong, but it felt like it did? Would you listen? Or would you turn away and never look back? Maybe some questions don't need answers. Maybe some stories are better left alone. But if you want to hear more, if you want to step just a little deeper into the dark, then stick around. There's more out there. More whispers. More shadows waiting. So, subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from. In towns like these, people disappear quietly. No headlines, no search parties, just gone. Ashridge Hollow isn't on most maps. Blink and you'll miss it. One road in, one road out. Maybe 24 homes scattered across old hills and trees that grow too close together. It's the kind of place where people wave at each other even if they don't really talk. Where kids grow up fast and stories spread faster. But the thing about stories is, sometimes they're not just stories. Back in the summer of 1996, a boy named Eli started hearing things on his shortwave radio. Static, voices. He thought it was just interference, maybe someone messing around. But within 3 months, one man had vanished. A dog went missing, and Eli was never the same again. This is what happened in Ashridge Hollow. If you believe in signs, this story is full of them. If you don't, you might want to start. Ashridge Hollow was never meant to be more than a stop on the way to somewhere else. It was founded back in 1868, during a coal boom. Folks came for work, stayed for family. The town grew just enough to have a church, a school, and a diner that stayed open way too late. But when the mines dried up in the 70s, so did the people. Businesses closed, homes emptied. The lights on Main Street went out one by one, and the town just kind of sat there. Still, quiet, forgotten. Surrounded on all sides by thick woods and steep hills, Ashridge Hollow feels cut off from everything. There's only one road in, and if you miss the turn, you won't find it again. Even in the 90s, there was no cell service out there. No cameras, no eyes. The people who stayed, they kept to themselves. You don't ask questions in Ashridge. You don't talk too loud. And when someone disappears, you don't go looking. That's just how it's always been. Eli wasn't like the others. 17. Smart kid. Quiet but curious. He'd spend hours in his room, fiddling with the shortwave radio he built from scraps. Said he liked hearing voices from faraway places. Said it made the world feel bigger. But one night, the voices didn't sound far away. They sounded close. Real close. Old folks around here used to say that the woods could talk. That if you listen long enough, they'd listen back. They'd say, voices carry in those trees. It started on a Tuesday. The rain had just let up. Eli was at his desk, fiddling with the radio again. Static came through, same as always, but then something else. A voice, low, broken, like it was coming through from far away. Not a regular broadcast, not music, just words. He thought maybe it was some old trucker signal bouncing off the clouds. That happens sometimes. But this sounded off. The voice didn't speak the way people do now. It had this slow, dragged-out rhythm, like something from another time. At first, he could only make out a few words. Don't follow. Marked. The hollow calls. Stuff like that made no sense, but he wrote them down anyway. The next day, he brought it up to the sheriff. showed him the notes, told him what he heard. The sheriff just smiled, told him to stay out of the woods and maybe get more sleep. That was the end of that conversation. But Eli couldn't let it go. He started staying up later, listening longer. Sometimes the voice would disappear for hours. Then out of nowhere, it'd return, louder, closer. Then one night, he heard what sounded like breathing, right there in the static. And it wasn't coming through the speaker. It was coming from behind him. Eli turned, heart racing. Nothing was there. Just the dark. Just the rain tapping the window. He figured he was imagining things, but the feeling didn't go away. Later that week, he walked into the woods with a flashlight and a tape recorder. Wanted to see if he could find where the signal was coming from. About a quarter mile in, he found something strange. Symbols, carved into tree trunks, deep, almost angry. Circles, lines, a shape like an open eye. They looked old, but fresh. He took a photo with a disposable camera. But when he developed the film a few days later, that frame was blank. That's when Mr. Beecham got involved. Old man. Lived in a cabin near the creek. Everyone in town knew he'd seen things. Most people just didn't ask. He saw Eli walking back from the woods, mud up to his knees, called him over, told him to sit. Didn't ask what he was doing out there, just looked him dead in the eye and said, "You don't listen to the woods, son. That's how they find you." Eli smiled, nodded, said thanks, then went home and turned the radio back on. The next night, the voice came through again. But this time, it said his name, Eli. Clear, slow, like it was trying to get his attention. And it worked. He stayed up all night, didn't sleep. The sun came up, and he still sat there, just listening. He didn't tell anyone, not even his parents. But after that, the voice never went away. The first thing to go missing was a dog. Belonged to the Denvers, an old couple who lived out past the gravel road. Big black lab named Charlie. Real friendly. Never barked much. One morning, he just wasn't there. Gate was open. No sign of struggle. No paw prints. Nothing. The Denvers asked around. Walked the tree line with flashlights. Nobody had seen him. Nobody heard anything. After a few days, folks stopped asking. Then a week later, the mailman didn't show. Greg Stanton, mid-40s, drove the same white Jeep every day, same route. Rain or shine, you could set your clock by him. He left the post office just after 6 p.m. Never made it home. Jeep was found parked sideways under power line. Driver's door still open, keys in the ignition, mail still in the back. At first, the sheriff said the storm got him. Maybe Greg tried to walk it, got lost, slipped, you know how it goes. But there was no storm that night, just rain. That's when people in town started whispering about the dog, about Greg, and about Eli. He kept quiet, but something had changed. He wasn't sleeping. Eyes were bloodshot. Clothes always damp. Said the radio wouldn't stop. And it didn't. The voice would come and go, but it always came back. And then, one night, it started saying the same thing over and over. He's marked now. Eli wrote it down, word for word, same voice, same tone, always just before the rain picked up. Then came the scratching. It was late, after midnight. His folks were asleep. Eli was at his desk, headphones on. The voice had gone quiet, static humming in his ears. And then scratch, right at the window. He froze, didn't move. Another scratch. Slower this time, like nails against glass. He turned off the radio, crept to the curtain, and pulled it back, fast. Nothing. No one. Just trees. Just rain. But when he stepped outside the next morning, there were footprints in the mud. Not his. Too wide. Too deep. They led from the woods, straight to his window, then back again. After that, things got worse. The voice changed. Not just words now, but tones. Sounds he couldn't place. Like old music from a broken machine. And Eli started getting sick. At first, he thought it was just the flu, but it wouldn't go away. He ran a fever for days, stopped eating, started mumbling in his sleep. He told his mom he kept dreaming of the woods, that he wasn't just in them, he was part of them. Trees growing over his arms, roots around his legs, a voice in the dark whispering his name. He'd wake up soaked in sweat, rain still falling, radio still on. And every single time, the same line would be waiting for him. He's marked now. They say if you dig deep enough in any small town, you're gonna find something people try to bury. Sometimes it's just stories. Sometimes it's more than that. Eli didn't set out to uncover anything. He just wanted to know why the voice kept calling, why it wouldn't stop, why it knew his name. But when you ask too many questions in Ashridge Hollow, people notice. He started at the library, local history section, dusty binders, cracked books. Most of it was the same stories they taught in school. Coal mining town, founded in 1868, boomed for a while, died out in the 70s. But something didn't sit right. There was a gap. The records just started, nothing before 1868. No mention of what the land was before it became Ashridge Hollow. So Eli asked the librarian. Old woman, sharp eyes. She stared at him a second too long, then said, "That part's not in books. Let it be," and walked away. So Eli went to the old courthouse, down into the archives, after hours, picked the lock on the basement door with a paperclip, flashlight in one hand, notebook in the other. It was cold down there, smelled like mold and rust, but he found something. A set of hand-drawn maps, yellowed and torn, dates going back to 1829, before Ashridge, before the coal. The area had a different name back then. Just one word, written in red ink, Barrow's End. There were notes in the margins, scribbled in faded ink, words like settlement lost, no trace, ground turned sour. One entry, dated May 1830, simply said, all gone, no graves to mark. But on one map, something stood out. A line of X's forming a ring, way out in the woods, right where the radio signal had always been strongest. The key called them burial sites, but no names, no dates, just that ring, just the hollow. The next few days, Eli changed. He was tired all the time, skin pale, hands shaking, said he couldn't sleep. But his mom kept finding him outside in the morning, barefoot, soaked from the rain, standing at the tree line, staring in. One night, she locked all the doors, hid the keys. But still, he was gone by dawn, found in the same spot, mud up to his knees. He didn't remember getting there, didn't remember the dreams either. But he started drawing things in his notebooks, over and over, the same shapes he saw in the woods, the same symbols from the trees, that open eye. And in the corner of every page, a name, the Hollow ones. Nobody in town ever said that name, not out loud, but it had been whispered by kids at sleepovers, by miners after too many drinks, by old folks with nothing left to lose. The hollow ones, tall, faceless, always watching from between the trees, never speaking, unless they wanted you to follow. Eli asked around. Everyone brushed him off, said it was just old ghost talk, campfire stories, but they wouldn't look him in the eye. One man, a groundskeeper who'd worked the town cemetery for 30 years, pulled him aside, told him quite like, "You stop walking that line, boy. You dig too deep. The dirt's gonna grab back." But Eli didn't stop. The voices were stronger now, clearer. Sometimes they sounded like people he knew. His mother, Mr. Beecham, even himself. They whispered in unison. Same phrase every time. "Come back to the ground." That's when Eli realized he hadn't been sleepwalking. He'd been following. The rain had been steady for 3 days straight. Streets turned to mud. Power flickered. Radios crackled in and out like something was pressing on the signal. People stayed inside, doors locked, lights low. But not Eli. On the 4th night, he packed his gear, a flashlight, his recorder, and a pocket knife he barely knew how to use. Said he needed answers. Said the voices wouldn't stop. Said they were getting close. He left after midnight. Didn't tell anyone. Just zipped up his coat, pulled on his boots, and stepped into the woods behind his house. The trail should have taken him 20 minutes, but it felt longer. The woods were wrong that night, quieter than usual, like even the wind didn't want to breathe. And then he heard it. Not static, not voices through the airwaves, but real voices, behind him, close, saying his name. "Eli, Eli, come see." He spun around, light shaking in his hand. Nothing, just trees and fog. But the air felt thicker, like walking through water. Then he saw it. Dead center of a hollow clearing stood a tree. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Black as star, trunk wider than a truck, burned but not dead. Bark curled like old paper, roots twisted out like fingers. It had no leaves, no branches, just a crown of smoke that curled even in the rain. And underneath it, bones. Piled in a ring around the trunk, some yellowed and cracked with age, others fresh, clean, with scraps of cloth still clinging to them. Eli stepped closer. Recorder on. The red light blinked, steady and sharp, and the voices got louder. "Stay. Don't run. You're home." He dropped to his knees, looked at one skull, small, maybe a child. Then the air shifted. The forest around him moved. He turned to run, but the trail he came in on was gone, replaced by another, then another, paths twisting like a maze. And no matter which way he turned, he ended up right back at that tree. His flashlight flickered. The air buzzed with static. The trees whispered. He ran again, this time harder, tripped once, got back up. Then something brushed his shoulder, cold and wet like fog with fingers. Branches scraped across his coat. Mud pulled at his feet. But he kept going, heart pounding, hands bleeding, until finally, he broke through the trees. They found Eli the next morning. He was curled up behind the church, soaked to the bone, covered in mud from head to toe. He wasn't speaking, just sitting there, staring at nothing, shivering. The paramedics said his heart was racing, like he'd run for miles, but he had no injuries, no broken bones, no signs of a fall, and not a single footprint around him. Just him, and that old recorder in his hand. The tapes were mostly static, blank, as if something had wiped them clean. All but one. We let them in. That's all it said. a voice that didn't belong to Eli. Male. And when the sheriff heard it, he didn't ask a single question. Didn't ask about the woods. Didn't ask about the tree. Didn't even ask how Eli ended up back in town. All he said was this: Ashridge ain't for him. You need to take your boy and go. Eli's parents packed within hours. Didn't even wait for the next morning. Just threw clothes in trash bags, loaded the truck, and left. But not everyone made it out in time. Mr. Beecham, the old man who'd warned Eli not to listen, was found dead 3 days later. Natural causes, they said, but he'd left a note. It was short, written in shaky, fading ink. It was our fault. We opened it in 1912. The hollow ones never left. Nobody knew what he meant. Or maybe they did, and just didn't want to say. No funeral was held. No obituary in the paper. Just a locked house and another silence added to the pile. See, the deeper you dig into Ashridge Hollow, the more it starts to feel like a stage. The old buildings, the boarded windows, the worn streets with no names, all just a cover, a skin stretched over something else, something older, something waiting. And Eli, he might have left the town behind, but what he brought back with him. We see you. Well, that doesn't go away so easy. It's been over 10 years since Eli left Ashridge Hollow. He doesn't talk about it in public. Changed his name, got an apartment in the city, got himself a job at a tech repair place, lives alone, keeps to himself. But sometimes, late at night, he still listens. Still has that old radio, keeps it locked in a metal case under his bed. Says he hasn't turned it on in years. But he lied. Last fall, on a night just like this one, cold, raining, full moon overhead, he posted something online. No name, no picture, just a black screen and a title. My story, don't listen too long. The video was simple, a voice, his voice, telling this exact story from the beginning. He went over everything, the transmissions, the tree, the voices, the whisper, everything, except the ending. And then, just as the video seems like it's done, just as the rain in the background starts to fade, a voice cuts in. Not his. We found you again. Eli. The rain stops. Just silence for 10 seconds, like the whole world was holding its breath. Then there's a sound. 3 knocks, right after the voice, right before the screen cuts to black. No one knows where the upload came from. The IP was scrambled, traced to a library that had been closed for months. People have tried reaching out. No replies, no updates. All we have is that file. Just a story, or maybe a warning. You're listening to it now. Maybe you've got earbuds in. Maybe you're in bed. Maybe it's raining where you are too. But one thing's for sure. Somewhere, out in the dark, someone's still listening. Stay awake. There's something about small towns like Ashridge Hollow, places no one thinks about anymore. No tourists, no traffic, just trees and quiet. And sometimes, not even that. You start to wonder if the town ever really wanted people there at all, or if it just tolerated them until it didn't. You hear stories like Eli's, and you think, maybe it's just folklore, just another campfire tale. But then it sticks with you, lingers. Like a song you don't remember learning, but somehow you already know the words. The woods don't forget, and the rain, it doesn't wash things away like they say. It just hides what's already there, Eli moved far away, started over, stopped telling his story. But every now and then, when the weather turns, he says he hears things again. The static, the voices, the knock. And always that same soft whisper, barely above the wind. Very faint whisper, come home. Some say Ashridge Hollow was just another coal town that died off. That the mines ran dry, the people moved on, and the rest faded into dust. But others, people who've been there or heard the stories passed down in whispers and side-eyes, they know better. They know some towns don't die. They just go quiet. Wait for someone to listen again. So, if you ever find yourself on a back road, fog rolling in, radio picking up something that's not quite music, don't stop, don't turn around, don't answer the knock. And whatever you do, don't listen too long. Good night. So, what would you do if the woods started calling your name? If you heard a voice that didn't belong, but it felt like it did, would you listen? Or would you turn away and never look back? Maybe some questions don't need answers. Maybe some stories are better left alone. But if you want to hear more, if you want to step just a little deeper into the dark, then stick around. There's more out there. More whispers. More shadows waiting. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, some places don't want to be found.